everybody, a very good morning. It is 7 o'clock here in the UK. Welcome wherever you're watching us around the world this morning. I am live here in St Ives in Cornwall as the UK prepares to host the G7 summit, which gets underway later on today. It's Friday, the 11th of June. A global shot in the arm, G7 leaders expected to commit to provide 1 billion COVID vaccine doses to the rest of the world, with 100 million coming from the UK.
We know that raging COVID-19 in other countries holds back global growth, raises instability, and weakens governments.
The stage is set. The guests are arriving. The Japanese Prime Minister, one of the first world leaders to touch down in Cornwall. This morning, I'm going to be speaking to the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, and the Shadow Foreign Secretary, Lisa Nandy. We'll also hear from local businesses and politicians as the eyes of the world focus on Cornwall. Plus, Rick Stein's son Jack on hopes the summit will boost the region's hospitality sector. The royal family will also play a key role in today's events. We'll see the Queen, the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall and the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge as well. They're all meeting G7 leaders later on today. Also this morning, 10 years on from the Winterbourne View scandal, how thousands of adults with learning disabilities are still being detained in mental health hospitals. After a year on the touchline, Euro 2020 kicks off the summer of sport in Rome this evening.
And slightly fresher conditions for today, but still mostly fine and dry, then heating up again through the weekend. I'll have more details later.
Good morning from Cornwall. We've got mizzle this morning, I'm being told by my cameraman Ed, which is a cross between mist and drizzle, and it's not picked up on the radars as far as rain is concerned. So when many of those leaders are opening their curtains this morning at the beautiful castle just on the hill there, they'll not be quite sure when they look at their app and think, well, it said it wasn't going to rain. Hopefully it will clear up for the next 3 days. The biggest issues facing the world will be discussed here in St Ives by political leaders at that G7 summit. Tackling the pandemic will feature heavily, with a pledge to give away 1 billion doses of COVID vaccines to the world's poorest nations. 100 million of those will come from the UK in the next year. Tomorrow, the leaders will toast marshmallows in a barbecue on the beach. Very nice. Tonight, it's a reception hosted by the Queen at the Eden Project, as our diplomatic editor, Dominic Waghorn, reports.
President Biden and Prime Minister Johnson have renewed a partnership forged in war. The Atlantic Charter, to face the perils of our time. In that spirit, Britain will now give 100 million vaccine doses to the world over the next year to fight COVID. America, 500 million.
America will be the arsenal of vaccines in our fight against COVID-19, just as America was the arsenal of democracy during World War II.
Together, G7 leaders will bring with them promises to give 1 billion vaccine doses to the world. It needs 2 billion. And as President Biden put it, failure to vaccinate everyone endangers us all.
As long as the virus rages elsewhere, there is a risk of new mutations that could threaten our people. We know that raging COVID-19 in other countries holds back global growth, raises instability, and weakens governments.
When they meet here in a luxury hotel, G7 leaders face an awesome challenge, seeing off grave threats with, they hope, renewed unity. But as they convene on Cornwall's historic coastline, differences are threatening to overcloud their meeting. A summit that should be about allies standing together, united against common looming threats, could instead be jeopardised by divisions over Northern Ireland that could leave its British hosts beleaguered and isolated. The G7 must show that the rancour and disunity of the Trump years are a thing of the past, because while this was going on, the West's autocratic rivals have been on the march. Listen to the man who used to be in charge of the Western alliance.
We are divided. We are too weak. We are characterized by self-doubt. and this must be changed. We have to change the mood. We have to build up more self-confidence.
After the disharmony of recent years, a chance to put the band back together. Joe Biden wants America to lead the world again. Will his allies take his cue and rise to the challenge? Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, Falmouth.
Okay, let's take a look at what will be happening here in Cornwall today, should we? This is day one of a three-day gathering, as I was saying. While President Biden is already in town, most world leaders will be arriving in Cornwall throughout the course of the day. And this afternoon, there'll be an official welcome and a G7 family photo. We're very used to those, aren't we? Probably with a bit more social distancing than that. Then the Duchess of Cambridge and the First Lady of the United States, Dr. Jill Biden, will meet today for an engagement. And the Queen will subsequently host a reception for attending dignitaries at the Eden Project this evening, joined by other members of the royal family. Meanwhile, Prince Charles will host a meeting of chief executives and will be joined by US climate envoy John Kerry and COP26 President Alok Sharma. There are a range of big issues to be discussed at this summit: climate change, COVID, vaccines and Brexit, amongst many, many others. Somebody who knows an awful lot about this sort of thing is the UK's former ambassador to the US, France and Turkey, Sir Peter Westmacott. Hello to you, Sir Peter. It's great to talk to you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. What do you think is going to be top of the agenda?
Well, I think President Biden set out what he thought was the main things on his mind when he was talking to Prime Minister Johnson yesterday. He wants international agreement and real progress on global health, on cybersecurity, on the strengthening of democracy after the rather difficult period of the last few years. He wants cybersecurity, he wants movement on trade, and of course there's an agreement which is almost complete on global taxation levels, which is quite important, but sometimes gets forgotten. So, you know, we're calling it the vaccine summit to some extent, and it is very important, I think, that the G7 leaders are agreeing to send as many as 1 billion, hopefully more, vaccines to parts of the world which have not been properly vaccinated. But I think all those issues are on the agenda. But what struck me yesterday, Kay, and also overnight, is how useful it has been to have President Biden in the United Kingdom for, if you like, 24 hours in advance of the summit, which gives the world a chance to see the President of the United States, you know, back on the world stage, reassuring, smiling, and a fully paid up member, if you like, of the moral leadership of the Western community. And I think it's good for the United Kingdom to have him here, but I think it's also a very good start for President Biden now that he is finally able to leave the shores of the United States and start traveling.
It's the first test, certainly, for Joe Biden. He's been the deputy on the world stage for many, many years before that. But as you said, first real visit for him. How do you think he'll get on with the other leaders?
President Biden has always struck me as a people person. Okay, he loves relationships. He's very interested in what makes others tick. He's interested in what others need from this or that negotiation. He's curious about other cultures, other parts of the world. He's immensely experienced, 40 years or so in the United States Senate, chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, and so on. And he will know some of these leaders quite well already. He didn't know Boris Johnson until they met yesterday. But I think that those relationships will be good. He's a very warm and tactile person, but he believes that his role is indeed to forge really meaningful partnerships with leaders of other like-minded countries, and indeed to stand up to bad behavior by leaders of less like-minded countries. But he will want to find others ready to make common cause with him on some of those really big issues that I touched on just now.
The PR machine would have us believe that these two world leaders are getting on like a house on fire already, but there is the spectre of Brexit, and we know that the President of the United States is not at all happy about any threat whatsoever to the Northern Ireland Agreement. So what impact do you think that's going to have on talks behind the scenes?
I think President Biden was very clear way back that he didn't think Brexit was a brilliant idea, that it wasn't great for Britain, wasn't great for America, that it wasn't great for the European Union either. And I think, you know, to take a phrase from that wonderful musical Hamilton, He would rather see Britain in the room where it happens rather than outside as a spectator. But all that is, if you like, in the past now. And so we are now moving forward. Yes, he knows that Boris Johnson was quite cozy with his predecessor. Yes, he knows that he was an architect of Brexit, but he is a realistic politician. He knows that the Prime Minister is not only his host, but also the leader of one of America's most important allies. So I think that those personal things will be, to some extent, put to one side, and the focus will be on what can we do, what do we really need to do together to make the world a safer, more prosperous place. So I think the chemistry will be fine. Both are kind of extrovert people type presidents and prime minister, and I think that the chemistry looks to me though it's got off to a pretty good start.
You say put to one side, and the chemistry might be pretty good between those two, but then enter stage left President Macron, who is saying, don't you even think about trying to renegotiate any part of the Brexit deal because it is simply not happening. Do you think there is a possibility that Brexit may start to overshadow this G7 summit?
I think there is that risk, and it was very striking that just a few days before the G7 summit, before President Biden's visit, that his acting ambassador was asked to go in and speak to the British government in very firm terms about the risk to the Good Friday Agreement and the risk to stability, if you like, on the island of Ireland if we carried on refusing to implement, if you like, the Northern Ireland Protocol as part of the withdrawal agreement, a protocol which the British government freely negotiated itself and now has some difficulty about implementing. For President Biden, for many, many years, indeed going back many generations, the whole issue of his Irish ethnic roots is very important. But more important than that, he cares deeply about peace on the island of Ireland. He was one of the architects of the earlier President Clinton initiatives way back when I was first in Washington 30 years ago in bringing an end to the Troubles, and he cares deeply about it. So yes, you're right that I think anything which is going on around the detailed implementation of Brexit, which turns out to be damaging to Good Friday Agreement and to stability and peace on the island of Ireland, this will be a matter of grave concern. I'm sure it came up in the bilateral yesterday. And of course, there are other European Union heads of government and the President of the Commission who are going to be in Cornwall, who are all concerned about not reopening the withdrawal agreement, which was so painfully negotiated with the United Kingdom. So I think it is an important part of the agenda alongside those very big global issues that everybody wants to make progress on as well.
And how much of these G7 events, you'll have seen very many of them over your experience and years, are they just photo ops, or does a lot of work actually get done behind the scenes?
Tons of work, of course, in the preparation. Look at all the things that you're seeing, look at the security, look at the new roads, the strengthening of new key airports to take Air Force One, all those things. Huge amount of effort goes into it, and I think it's wonderful for Cornwall. I hope the mizzle disappears and you get some nice sunshine so we can see how marvelous it is. But to be more serious for a moment, I do think that for the leaders of these 7 countries to come together in person, especially when they've only been able to talk through Zoom and Teams and so on for the last pretty much 18 months, is important. And I think personal relationships do matter. There are some heads of government for whom it doesn't make much difference. They go through the motions, they read the brief, they sign off what officials advise them to do. I would say that in the case of our own Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and President Biden, who I knew when he was Vice President, that personal relationships and making progress together and understanding bottom line of the other players, these are really important things. And especially after the 4 years of President Trump, I think that President Biden will really want to reassure his fellow heads of government of like-minded countries that America is back and collegiate. And this is not so much the last 4 years were a blip, but that it was very much not the end of consensual internationalism of America, but that it was a 4 years which is now in the past. And Biden will be doing all he possibly can to show not only that America is back for now, but that America is back for good.
Quick thought before I let you go. It's a very big gathering here, certainly pulling out all the stops, barbecues on the beach with marshmallows, goodness knows what else. But to what extent is the UK still a big player in the G7, or are we just kidding ourselves?
Now, playing host to a meeting like this is a wonderful opportunity, and it is a challenge to any host government to show what they can do. So it's nice if the sun shines and the sky is blue, but if you haven't got that, nevertheless, you can make everything else work effectively. I think this is the sort of thing that the UK is good at. I'm thrilled to see that Her Majesty is going down to the Eden Project, will be there this evening with the Prince of Wales, with the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. I think our royal family are magnificent assets in terms of Britain's diplomacy and Britain's place in the world. And that will give a lot of pleasure, I'm sure, to the visitors. I think we're good at this stuff. We are still on the top table of the United Nations Security Council, at NATO and so on. We're not any longer in the European Union. Personally, I regret that, but that's where we are now. But I still would say there's everything to play for. And if we are realistic about what we mean by things like global Britain, and we work out where we can continue to make a real difference for good and for prosperity and engaging with like-minded countries, then we can still look forward to a meaningful future where the other countries continue to take the UK seriously and don't begin to sort of write us off, as some threatened to do once they saw the direction that Brexit was going in.
OK, Sir Peter Westmacott, always great to talk to you. Thanks for taking the time this morning. Thank you.
Pleasure, Kay.
Let's bring in our political correspondent, Rob Powell, who's been listening to what the former ambassador had to say, and also to look ahead to the G7 summit later on today. Good morning, Rob.
Morning, yeah. I think what was interesting in what Sir Peter was saying was that despite, I think, maybe some passed on paper differences between Boris Johnson and Joe Biden, he was sort of suggesting that the combination of a lot of big issues that need tackling, be it climate change, be it the pandemic, be it cybersecurity, mixed up with the sort of affability that these two men have, the personal relationship, which seems to have got off to a good start, should hopefully get them through. That's not to say, though, that there aren't tensions bubbling under the water. I think largely issues around Northern Ireland was sort of stomped down below the waterline yesterday. Whether that changes when Emmanuel Macron flies in this morning, when the EU Council President and the President of the European Commission come later today as well, that remains to be seen. In terms of what we'll see later today, I think very much the majority of the pictures coming out of where you are, Kay, today will be the sort of fun, friendly side of the G7 in terms of, as you say, the big family photos, the royals visiting dinner at the Eden Project, before really the tough talk and the more thorny issues start tomorrow. In terms of today's big topic that the government wants to talk about anyway, vaccine sharing the surplus of our own jab stocks. I think maybe the UK government is hoping that by pulling other countries in to donate their jabs, this could be one of those issues that allows these countries to coalesce and to come together and to present a united front on the world stage.
OK, for now, Rob, thank you. Still to come on the programme for you this morning, live from St Ives. Which issues does Labour want prioritised at the G7 meeting? The Shadow Foreign Secretary, Lisa Nandy, will tell us at 7:40. At 8:05, I'll be speaking exclusively to the Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, about that pledge to donate 100 million COVID vaccine doses to poorer nations and his hopes for the summit. And I'm going to be asking also the former Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard about her plea to G7 leaders to give girls better access. That is at 8:20. So all of that to come, as I said, throughout the course of the morning. Do not go anywhere. Before that, though, I want to tell you about the family of a man with autism and a learning disability. He's trying to get him released from a mental health hospital, claiming the care that he has been receiving has made his condition even worse. He's one of more than 2,000 people being held in such units in England, despite government promises to reduce that number. Here's Gerard Tubb with more.
This was a couple of months before. He wasn't great, but he was better.
Becky Davis is convinced her 26-year-old brother should not be in the mental hospital where he's been held for 3 years. We're not identifying him to protect his privacy. He has autism and a learning disability and was confined when his mental health deteriorated.
We had a good period of where he was settled for a good 6 to 12 months. But obviously there was nowhere for him to go. So he had to stay there. So he kept asking when he wanted to come home. And we couldn't give him an answer, which then made him deteriorate.
10 years ago, the government set a target to reduce the number of people held in mental health assessment and treatment units. In the wake of the Winterbourne View scandal, when abuse at a private hospital near Bristol was exposed, the target has been missed twice and has now been moved to 2024. A specialist lawyer told us a shortage of suitable community facilities is partly to blame.
You don't see those community services necessarily as much as you need to, because quite a lot of the time they require bespoke packages or particular parts of care which perhaps aren't straightforward to organise. And it's about everyone working collaboratively to try and actually achieve that. And unless that happens, these individuals unfortunately end up being stuck in hospital, ready to be discharged, but for a community package being in place, which is the worst scenario.
Becky's brother is being held in a hospital run by the Tees, Esk and Wear Valleys NHS Trust, which told us its staff are dedicated to providing the best possible care for individuals and that it makes every effort to support adults with a learning disability to live in the community. MPs debated the missed targets this week to mark the 10th anniversary of the Winterbourne View scandal.
It is a complete failure of government to take the action that they pledged to do when that appalling abuse was revealed. Why should autistic people and people with learning disabilities be treated this way? I want to show that they're not invisible, that we do care and that we are listening to their issues.
The Department for Health and Social Care told us it is determined to continue to reduce the number of people with learning disabilities and autistic people in mental health hospitals and is investing £62 million in community services and supporting discharges. Becky has now found community accommodation for her brother and hopes he can be released from hospital soon. Gerard Tubbs, Sky News, Thirsk.
More from the G7 summit live here in St Ives in just a moment, but also making the news for you this morning. Figures released in the last few moments show a big rise in GDP. The Office of National Statistics says it grew 2.3% in April, but that's still nearly 4% below pre-pandemic levels. One of the biggest video games companies in the world has become the victim of a cyber attack. Electronic Arts has revealed the coding to build some of its best-selling games has been stolen, but claims the theft will not impact on its business. It's claimed nearly half of the clothes sold by leading fast fashion brands are made entirely from non-recycled plastics. The Royal Society for the Arts analysed more than 10,000 items of women's clothing advertised by major online retailers. MPs say young people are at risk of retiring with inadequate income later in life because they can't afford to make pension contributions. The Commons Public Accounts Committee says the Treasury hasn't done enough to ensure that people understand the real value of their pension. Almost 100 recipients of honours are backing a campaign for the government to replace the title Empire with Excellence. They say it would recognise Britain's colonial imperialist past and the harm and trauma it had caused. The Cabinet Office says there are no plans to change the wording. Now, the adventures of a herd of elephants have become one of the biggest news stories in China. We showed you the pictures, didn't we, earlier on in the week? The Asian elephants started trekking across the country in March of last year. They headed north from a nature reserve on the border with Myanmar. By the end of the year, they travelled more than 200 miles, reaching Mojiang County. Most of them have reached Kunming City. That's a journey of more than 300 miles, the equivalent of walking from Yorkshire to here in Cornwall. Our Asia correspondent Tom Cheshire reports.
The elephants have packed their trunks, said goodbye to the jungle, and gone off with a trumpety trump on a mysterious tour around southern China. This herd has been on the move for more than a year, going all the way from their home on a wildlife reserve to the big city lights of Kunming, the provincial capital. They've been wreaking havoc, raiding farms for food and water, and show no signs of stopping. And no one really knows why.
In the past years, the number of the elephants has increased because poaching has gone. But meanwhile, the population in the area has also increased, and more land that can be the potential habitat for elephants has been occupied by human activities.
Authorities have been trying to keep people out of their path, constantly filming them with drones to keep track. And as a result, they've become social media stars. People all around China have been following every development, like when these calves found themselves in a spot of bother. And hundreds of millions of people watched this video, actually quite a rare sight in the natural world, of the elephants taking a well-deserved nap on the ground. Even far away in the capital, Beijing, most people have an opinion.
因为其实他们为什么就是要先这么远去找一个新的栖息地呢？
中国现在是非常安全安稳的，所以我相信大象是因为看到中国的疫情。
从现象来看，感觉不是说就是环境说受到很大破坏造成的这种情况，因为现在保护这个栖息地的这方面还是做得不错的。
And so off they continue to trot. We can never truly know the mind of an elephant, and perhaps they do not know their own. We can only wish them well on their odyssey and hope they find what they're looking for. Tom Cheshire, Sky News, Beijing.
Absolutely love elephants. I was saying earlier on in the week that they can actually communicate with each other 2 miles apart, and because of the level of the pitch, we can't hear with the human ear. So that's probably how they're managing to all stay together. Because you're with me so early, I'm going to treat you to a little look at St Ives. I'm going to move out of the way and Ed will show you. This is the harbour here at St Ives. Very beautiful. Even though we've got a bit of mizzle this morning, that's going to burn off, I believe, a bit later on for these G7 world leaders. But you can imagine the sort of security that is here as a result of that. Officers on jet skis just keeping an eye not only here but around the bay as well, where the world leaders will be waking up for their breakfast this morning. 11,000 police officers are here in St Ives Bay from all around the country. They're actually being housed out on a cruise ship at sea because there literally wasn't enough room for them all on land. 150 sniffer dogs as well, bomb disposal teams. We've seen plenty of those. And I'm not sure, Ed, if you can show me the warship, just behind there, but that I think is the Tamar, and the Tamar was the one you may remember that actually went to Jersey quite recently during that fishing wars with some of the fishing vessels from the French fishermen who were very unhappy about what was happening as far as Brexit was concerned. I believe that is Tamar. Alongside that, her sister ships, Tyne, Ranger, Frigate, Blazer, Northumberland and Jersey are all here as well. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of what's going on here in the harbour this morning. It's going to be an absolutely packed day for the politicians as more and more of them arrive. The big question is, I suppose, is it going to be sunny for their barbecue later on?
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. It's actually going to be quite a cloudy day across parts of Cornwall, the southwest generally, and across parts of Wales. Although it's murky this morning, yes, the murky conditions will generally clear from southern coastal areas, but across the southwest, it's likely to stay murky for much of the day, cloudy with some patchy light rain and drizzle. Elsewhere, we're seeing some bright or sunny spells developing, and across northern and western parts of England and Wales this morning, there's patchy light rain and drizzle. It's that front with the cloud that's working its way southwards this afternoon to southern parts of Wales, parts of the Midlands, down towards the southwest. So a dull day there. Central, southern and eastern areas of England, lots of sunshine, still very warm, but behind that front, slightly cooler, but still warm enough with sunny spells, but blustery showers over northern Scotland.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Coming up as the G7 summit begins here in Cornwall this morning, we'll speak with the Shadow Foreign Secretary Lisa Nandy in just a moment. Stay tuned. Again, a very good morning to you. We are live in St Ives for you this morning ahead of the G7 summit. Those noises off, the deliveries for, obviously you can imagine just how busy it is here on the seafront, not least because it's the middle of the summer, but also because of the extra people that are here as a result of the G7 summit, and they're delivering all the beers and things for the pubs on the seafront. We'll show you a bit later on. Those leaders have made a big promise to tackle the global pandemic while they're here at the start of the summit. They're expecting to give 1 billion doses of coronavirus vaccines to help countries trying to stop the spread of COVID-19. Amongst them, of course, Africa, and our Africa correspondent John Sparks has been tracking the spread of the virus there and joins us from Johannesburg this morning. Hello to you, John. So one of the theories was that every time somebody in the Western world, developed world, got a jab in the arm, that should happen in places like Africa as well. Where are we with that? Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Kay. Well, it's really been very much a two-track vaccination process. People in the wealthier countries in the so-called West have been getting vaccines, have access to vaccines. People in places like Africa simply have not been. And pressure has been building on the US. Countries like the US, the UK, where the majority of people have had access to a vaccine, to spell out how they are going to help developing world countries get access to sufficient supplies. And this is a particularly pressing issue here in Africa, where a third wave of infection is now taking root. While vaccination rates remain pitifully low, we're talking about less than 1% of the population in Africa have received or have been fully vaccinated. Even in South Africa, with a relatively advanced economy and healthcare system, 0.8% of the population here has been fully vaccinated. In response, the UK says it's going to donate 100 million doses that are surplus to its requirements to COVAX. 80% of those going to COVAX, the UN-led vaccine sharing facility. The Americans say they're going to buy 500 million Pfizer vaccines, 200 million, they say, by the end of the year. Boris Johnson calling this a massive step to beat the pandemic for good. But I think a lot of people in the public health world will call that an overstatement. We've just come back from Lesotho. I can tell you that in Lesotho, key health workers are still trying to get their first of a two-dose vaccine. They are so far behind there. The general public have no possibility of getting a vaccine. And the experience in Lesotho is also the experience of Africa as a whole, where they have received 50 million jabs, but they're going to need billions. They're going to need billions of vaccines. The population of the continent is 1.3 billion, and we just don't have the infrastructure, the financial support to provide those vaccines. The UK says it will supply 5 million by the end of September. The WHO, it's looking for 225 million by the end of September to try and vaccinate 10% of the population on the continent. So there is such a long way to go with this. It's a start. I think that's all we can say.
OK, for now, thanks so much indeed, John, and we'll certainly be putting that to the Foreign Secretary when he joins us exclusively just after 8 o'clock this morning. 100 million doses pledged by the UK. Will that be enough? Let's ask, should we, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, who's joining us now, Lisa Nandy. Hello to you, Lisa Nandy. Lots to talk about. Let's start where we finished off there with 100 million doses from the UK. Is that going to be enough? It's just a start. Where should we go from here?
Well, it is just a start, but it's a welcome start because there's a very, very strong case for getting the vaccine out to frontline healthcare workers around the world in countries where they're simply being overwhelmed, and doing that relatively quickly. But what we need to get from this summit is an agreement about a plan to actually ramp up capacity around the world and get the vaccine out to every corner of the globe. We've been locked in a debate about should we send more from Britain or should we administer those vaccines here in Britain. The truth is that we have to do both, and that means that we need to invest in factories, in capacity, in countries where they have none at the moment. It means we need to invest in healthcare systems in other countries in order to make sure they can actually administer the vaccine, because in many places that's a real problem as well. And if G7 leaders can reach an agreement on that, it won't just be good for the world, us fulfilling our moral duty. It will also, as the IMF said recently, represent the biggest return on investment in modern history, because the economic fallout of the failure to tackle COVID-19 is going to come back to visit us here in Britain very, very quickly.
Just one of the issues that the G7 leaders are going to be discussing here in Cornwall. Brexit is going to be another problem, potentially, it would appear, for the government. We know already that President Biden not at all happy about anything that might derail the Good Friday Agreement. And then President Macron flying in today, giving another headache for the Prime Minister, it would seem. How important do you think it is that Brexit's on the agenda here?
Well, I think Brexit needs to just be resolved in order that we can move on and deal with the really pressing issues. COVID-19, climate change, global tax reform, which would bring billions to Britain, but which the UK is holding out against. And it's hard to think of a Prime Minister who's going into a G7 summit as the host in a worse state. He's not only at loggerheads with the EU 5 years after we voted to leave, he's also been rebuked by the President of the United States, and he's locked in a battle with his own backbenchers in the Tory party over international aid, which is a key plank of his global Britain policy. I think the Prime Minister just needs to resolve these things. It shouldn't take the President of the United States to tell the UK Prime Minister that he ought to uphold the peace agreement in Northern Ireland. That ought to be an article of faith for any UK Prime Minister. And what we need to see from Boris Johnson is not just the warm words, which he had yesterday. It was welcome to hear him and President Biden affirm their commitment to upholding the Good Friday Agreement. We now need to see him just use some creativity and goodwill to reduce the friction in the Irish Sea, and then just get on with delivering for priorities that are actually going to be of enormous benefit to Britain.
This is supposed to be a Green summit. We know that the Prime Minister's already been criticised for flying in on a private jet. I mean, your own leader, not without guilt on things like that. I believe he flew up to Newcastle recently, Edinburgh, forgive me, in order to put an ad together for being green. We all need to do more in order to try to save the planet. There are demonstrators, I don't know if we can see them, Ed, just behind me, saying if the sea dies, then we die. What more do we need to start to do? What more do our leaders need to do to try to save the planet?
Look, I think it's right to say that we all need to take some personal responsibility for this. And I think my sense is that most people do try to cut down on their carbon footprint. But individual action alone is not going to be enough. We need a global agreement. And it's 6 months to go until the UK co-hosts one of the most important summits imaginable, the COP26 in Glasgow, where we're going to have to reach an agreement on the action that is going to be taken to get us to climate safety. This is a huge environmental catastrophe waiting to happen, but it's also an economic catastrophe as well, with so much of the world's pensions savings invested in fossil fuels. There's a huge economic fallout if we don't get this right for ordinary people across this country. So this is the summit where we need an agreement about that. The Prime Minister ought to be urging other world leaders to sign up to binding targets, not in decades to come, but in this coming decade. The trouble is, he goes into it having, as you alluded to with the issue about the plane, having not taken the action necessary at home in order to get us to climate safety. So while Germany and France are turning up at this summit with a huge green stimulus on the table, the United States as well, the UK's plan to get us to climate safety had just 4 billion of new money. That pales into insignificance compared to the 2 trillion in green stimulus that President Biden is offering. And it means that Britain will be behind the curve in terms of creating the green, clean energy jobs of the future that could help to level up the country. So that there are two things at stake here for the Prime Minister, as well as the very pressing issue of climate safety. His global Britain agenda, which has to deliver, and his levelling up agenda as well, which should be delivering those clean energy jobs here at home.
OK, I mean, twice in a week you've indulged me on the programme, Ms Nandi. I better let you go and not override my luck. Thank you very much indeed for joining us as always.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Now, better late than never, the European Football Championships finally kicks off this evening. Many matches have been moved to Wembley, with fan numbers drastically cut due to the pandemic. Shingi Marake reports.
The build-up is nearly over. A year later than planned, the biggest sporting event since the pandemic brought life to a standstill is set to begin. With England, Scotland and Wales in contention, the hope is that the European Football Championships will help lift the spirits of the nations.
I'm getting a bit of that 1996 vibe. starting to go on now. You know, that real sense of excitement and involvement and national interest, and of course the pandemic is adding to that.
In many ways, that feel-good factor will look and sound very different. Before the passion, agony and ecstasy that come with watching the beautiful game will come precautions. Social distancing measures are in place at the 11 stadiums hosting the tournament, while capacity at many of the grounds, including in London and Glasgow, is limited.
A ticket will no longer be enough for fans coming to watch the games here at Wembley. In a sign of the times, they will need to show proof of full vaccination or a negative COVID test to enter the stadium.
For people watching the game away from stands in pubs, bars and restaurants, the fun will also be more organised than usual. This pub in Surrey is expecting the Euros to boost profits, but they face a balancing act between serving pints and enforcing restrictions.
We are certainly expecting a bit of a bump, especially on the England games where most of our pubs are sold out, already fully booked, which is great as far as I'm concerned, because it means we can monitor the numbers and all of that and not have hundreds of people turn up or just expecting a table.
COVID isn't the only concern ahead of the event. The controversy around fans booing England players' decision to take the knee will continue to be a talking point.
I cannot understand the mentality of any fan who pays for a ticket, travels to a stadium to support the team, and then the first thing to do as the referee blows the whistle is to boo their own players. It's beyond comprehension.
The tournament kicks off tonight in Rome, before Wales, led by Gareth Bale, become the first of the British sides to play tomorrow, taking on Switzerland in Baku. England, preparing as usual at St George's Park, host Croatia at Wembley on Sunday, and Scotland will hope to make the most of their home advantage when they face the Czech Republic at Hampden Park on Monday. For fans who have had to wait an extra 12 months for this feast of European football, the hope is that 2021 will be the odd year the trophy comes home. Shingi Mararike, Sky News.
I'm sure those games will be on here in many of the pubs and restaurants at St Ives, the first day of the G7 summit here in Cornwall. Beautiful, beautiful start to your morning. Hopefully you appreciate the view just as much as we do. We're speaking to the Police and Crimes Commissioner for the region in just a moment.
Well, essentially, it's instead of going to a campsite, you carry your tent on your back and you take it up a mountain, wherever you want to go, really. It's the freedom of being able to go wherever you like, isn't it, really? I mean, we climb mountains, we go by tarns and spend the night there, get the drone out. And we do YouTube channels as well, and we love it, don't we? Yeah. Keeps him off his PC as well, which is the main thing. He enjoys it, don't you? Yeah. He doesn't like the climb. Usually you have to climb 500, 600 metres high with the bag on the back, so it can be quite hard, but once you get up there, you love it, don't you, really? Yeah. Well, where have we gone? We've been to Red Screes. It's all around the lakes. Last week, where did we go to last week?
Seathwaite Fell.
Seathwaite Fell. We went around Sprinkling Tarn, Place Fell. Which is the best one, would you say? He likes Angle Tarn. He likes all the ones by the water because they tend to be easier to get to. But it's so good. I mean, it gets me and him out together, and that's what we like, really. But father-son bonding, isn't it, Josh? Father and son bonding.
This monastery is under the protection for now of Russian peacekeepers. I'm Dinah Magnay and I'm Sky's Russia correspondent, based here in Moscow. I witnessed the despair of the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh. It's Armenians who've abandoned these villages now. Quite what their strategy is, I'm not sure, but they have made some arrests already today.
They can't arrest everybody.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. This clearly says, I love Hitler. Russia insists that its military build-up in the Arctic is purely defensive.
My name is Fatma Zilzila, the founder of Ikisa from Kuwait, where we face many environmental problems related to waste pollution, deforestation, and lack of information. We are collecting recyclables from houses, schools, and businesses in order to recycle them. In exchange of your recyclable, you get a tree.
Did you know symptoms of hay fever can develop at any stage of life, not just in childhood? The Pollen Reports, sponsored by Philips Connected Air Purifiers.
It's cloudy for many places to start with, particularly across parts of the west with some rain, mainly over the hills. But there will be sunny spells developing into the afternoon. However, parts of central and southwestern areas will be rather cloudy with patchy light rain and drizzle and showers over northern parts of Scotland and slightly fresher compared to recently. Pollen levels are now very high in some spots, mainly across the Midlands, central, southern and eastern England today, whereas Wales and the north of England will experience moderate levels and Scotland and Northern Ireland will be low. Grass pollen is now in peak season, fungal spores are at medium risk and there's lots of weed pollen too.
The Pollen Reports, sponsored by Philips Connected Air Purifiers.
Hello again, everybody. A very warm welcome from St Ives this morning as the leaders of the world's richest nations, along with diplomats, the media and protesters, descend on Cornwall. What are the security concerns here? Someone who knows all about it is the Devon and Cornwall Police and Crime Commissioner, and that's Alison Hernandez. Hello to you.
Hello, good morning.
It's lovely to see you this morning. Good morning. We've seen some of your guys already this morning on a jet ski, just patrolling, making sure everything's as it should be. What sort of planning has gone into making the events of the next few days as successful as possible?
An absolutely huge amount of planning. In fact, in some of the early stages, there were about 50 officers in preparing for this. That started to expand to about 200 just to get the logistics right. We're working in partnership with a lot of agencies as well, and particularly the armed forces. So this isn't just a policing and security of the event. It's actually a huge partnership with everybody down here to keep us safe. And that's how we work down here. We're surrounded by sea on three sides, so it's the only way to do it.
Yeah, very tricky though. Some of the roads are very narrow. As I was driving down here yesterday, you know, I've got one of those SUVs and it was quite tight for me. Apparently the Beast, which is the presidential card, can't fit down these roads. So that's causing you all sorts of problems as well.
Well, we have a largely rural road network down here. In fact, one of the things we're really concerned about is some of the people who get killed on our roads. So we take it very seriously. I think the challenges for us is that the locals are familiar with all of these roads, and I think when you've got vehicles that are not used to it, it is a surprise. And I think, but it's part of our quaintness. It's part of why we like it down here, and it does sort of keep those types out normally. So there's something about they're very special to be able to come down here and be able to experience it.
Okay, 6,500 police officers from all around the country. I think you're hosting some of them out on cruise ships because there isn't enough bed space on the mainland. How difficult is it, how much of a challenge to get all of those police services to work together?
Well, firstly, this is an opportunity to showcase UK policing, really. You know, we are largely an unarmed police experience in the UK, so we're really proud to be able to do it. We've got every force represented in Cornwall at the moment. That's unusual. That's never happened in the country before. And actually, one of the things that we've been doing is we want to make sure that they're doing it the Devon and Cornwall way. So they're all arriving at HQ in Exeter. I call it they're getting a bit sheep-dipped into the way that we do things round here, and then they're coming down to Cornwall. So yeah, it's been a bit of a logistical challenge just for the accommodation to, you know, supply that for all those officers. But we've done it, we've made it. Now we're moving into the policing element of it, obviously, and we'll see what happens now as we move into that operational aspect.
And what are the biggest threats to the public?
For us at the moment, I would say usual crime is still happening. Let's not forget that. We might have a G7 summit. We are one of the lowest crime areas in the country, so that's why we have so many visitors. #1 domestic tourist destination. But it's just the usual stuff that they need to be thinking about. I want to make sure that people actually reach out to policing if they need them in this time, particularly those who are experiencing all sorts of crimes like domestic abuse, or if you're having anything that's happening to you in your home, do feel free to reach out to the police. case I don't want them to think they're not available for local people at the moment.
And COVID is a big issue for you. I know there's a restaurant and hotel literally just up the coast from where we are now. They've had to close because I think about 13 of their staff contracted COVID out of 18 of them. COVID is a big problem with so many people in such a small space.
Well, we had the summer last year here, and I have to reassure people, you know, when we opened up after some of the lockdowns, we had loads of tourists come and visit, and we didn't have a spike in terms of the COVID. So I think people are generally keeping themselves safe. I think the fact that they're doing their regular testing is good, that they're identifying it early, and that's the way that we can keep most people then assured that it's safe to come down here and enjoy themselves.
You're pleased that they're all here, all the G7 world leaders. You'll be pleased when they've gone?
Oh, the funny thing is, I made a joke this morning because obviously Devon and Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, you know, some of them are not going to feel what's happening in Cornwall at the moment. It will pass many people by. So it's a bit about the media explaining what G7 is doing, some of the important talks that they're having. But I think when they're gone, everyone's going to be a bit of a sigh of a relief, a bit of an opportunity to take a breath. Especially the policing team, we've worked tirelessly to actually get this preparation in order.
OK, I know you're very busy, so I'll let you go. It's good to talk to you, Alison Hernandez. Thank you very much indeed, the Crime Commissioner here in Devon and Cornwall. We've got some mizzle. Apparently mizzle's a word, is that right, Alison?
Oh, it is.
Yeah, a mizzle, which is is like mist and drizzle together, but it's going to burn off later on, I hope. Let's find out with Naz.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. It is going to be feeling slightly cooler or slightly less warm across many areas for today. But then as we head into the weekend, it heats up once again. And for some spots, there will be a heat wave developing. This morning, it's mild, it's muggy, fairly cloudy as well. There's coastal fog around southern and western areas. Also patchy light rain and drizzle across the north and west of England and Wales. Showers over northern Scotland. And they will continue across the north and west of Scotland, perhaps to the northwest of Ireland later, where the winds are going to remain strong. The patchy light rain and drizzle will sink southwards to the Midlands, southern Wales and the southwest of England. So a cloudy, murky day down towards Cornwall today. But central, southern and eastern England, very warm and sunny, less warm but bright elsewhere.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
That's our first hour already done here in St Ives ahead of the G7 summit opening later on today. Let me show you around, even though there is a bit of mizzle, as I was saying, and you heard there from Naz, people still out on the beach exercising their dogs. This morning we've seen an awful lot of police officers around as well, many of them on jet skis, making sure not only the G7 leaders but also the people here in Devon and Cornwall, either locals or people that are here on holiday at this time of year, are all being kept safe. There are one or two demonstrators as well. They were pretty noisy with their foghorns earlier this morning, but that has quietened down a little bit for now. I'm just going to move out of the way and then we can give you a lovely nice pan around and look at St Ives harbour. I can tell you coming up in just a few moments time we'll be hearing from the Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab speaking to us exclusively here on Sky News. Stay tuned.
dan usaha saya menggarap lahan hutan